The radio crackled to life at 0347 hours, cutting through the pre-dawn silence like a blade. Perimeter breach. All personnel freeze. I repeat, all personnel freeze. Sergeant Price's voice boomed across the compound as boots thundered against concrete, echoing off the corrugated metal walls of Camp Resolute's barracks. A weapon clattered to the ground somewhere in the darkness, the metallic ring sharp and final. Who authorized that shot? Price's bark cut through the chaos. Show yourself now! Staff Sergeant Elara Cross stepped forward from the shadows near the armory, her hands still trembling from more than just the cold desert air. These were the same hands that had killed a fellow soldier 6 months ago. Tonight, those hands might have killed again. Hands shot up in the shadows, some steady, others trembling. In the dim amber glow of the security lights, Elara's tactical gloves caught the light. Clean, but her mind flashed to another night when they'd been slick with blood. The sirens began their wail, rising and falling like a mechanical scream that seemed to bounce off every surface, every building, every soul standing frozen in the Iraqi dawn. Does justice only arrive when no one expects it? The words hung in the air, shouted by someone, no one, everyone. An unidentified figure was hustled away between two MPs, boots scraping against gravel. Then silence. Then the harsh flash of a camera, freezing the moment in stark white light. The shutter clicked once more, and the night swallowed everything whole. But what happens when the accused becomes the hero? When the broken become the healers? This is a story about courage that arrived late, wearing an unexpected face, and it changed everything. 12 hours earlier, Elara Cross had been cleaning her sidearm in the armory, the familiar weight of the M9 Beretta steady in her hands. The gun oil's sharp scent mixed with the metallic tang that seemed to permeate every corner of Camp Resolute, a forward operating base that squatted like a concrete tumor in the heart of Anbar province. She wasn't supposed to be here. Not in the armory, not at this hour, and certainly not handling weapons anymore. The friendly fire incident had seen to that. You know why they transferred me here? Elara's voice was barely above a whisper as she worked the cleaning rod through the barrel. The armory felt smaller suddenly, the walls pressing in with their racks of rifles and cases of ammunition. This was her world now. Logistics, inventory, the safe distance of numbers and requisition forms. No more field operations. No more split-second decisions that could end a life. Cross. The voice made her jump. Private First Class Kai Nguyen stood in the armory doorway, his slight frame silhouetted against the harsh fluorescent lights. At 19, he was one of the newest arrivals at Camp Resolute, fresh from training and still carrying that wide-eyed look that combat hadn't yet beaten out of him. Nguyen. She nodded, trying to keep her voice steady. Shouldn't you be at evening chow? He stepped into the armory, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd learned early that drawing attention was dangerous. His parents had fled Vietnam in a fishing boat when he was 2, he'd told her once. They'd built a life in Orange County, raised 3 kids, sent them all to college. But Kai had chosen the army instead. Wanted to check my weapon, he said quietly. Major Vance announced another patrol tomorrow. Sector 7. The same sector where Martinez died, Elara thought, but kept the words locked inside. I was on patrol 6 months ago, Elara said, her voice catching slightly. Sector 5, night mission. Contact came from everywhere at once. Muzzle flashes, shouting, chaos. She paused, the cleaning rod trembling in her hands. I saw movement behind a concrete barrier, weapon raised, threatening posture. I had 3 seconds to decide. Kai turned from his locker, sensing the weight of what she was sharing. It was Corporal Martinez, 22 years old, father of twin girls back in El Paso. The words came out flat, emotionless. The muzzle flash lit up his face for just a split second before he fell. Before Kai could respond, heavy footsteps echoed in the corridor. Major Garrick Vance appeared in the doorway, his weathered face set in its perpetual scowl. 23 years in the Army had carved deep lines around his eyes and mouth. He commanded Camp Resolute with an iron fist and a deep suspicion of anyone who didn't fit his narrow definition of a soldier. Cross, Nguyen. His voice carried the weight of authority and barely concealed disdain. "What are you two doing here?" "Weapon maintenance, sir," Elara replied, standing at attention. "Weapon maintenance." Vance's eyes moved from her disassembled sidearm to Kai's rifle case. "Funny thing about weapons, Cross, they're only as reliable as the person holding them." The words hit like a physical blow, but Elara kept her expression neutral. "Yes, sir." "We don't tolerate mistakes here," Vance continued, his gaze boring into her. "And we sure as hell don't tolerate ghosts." Ghosts. That's what they called soldiers who'd lost their nerve, who haunted the base without purpose or courage. Elara felt the familiar burn of shame in her chest, but before she could respond, Kai stepped forward. "Sir, if I may." "You may not, Private." Vance's attention shifted to the younger soldier. "You're new here, Nguyen, so let me give you some advice. Choose your associations carefully. This isn't a place for sentiment or misplaced loyalty." After Vance left, the armory felt even smaller, the weight of unspoken words pressing down on them both. "You don't owe them your pain," Kai said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper. Elara looked at him, really looked, and saw something she recognized. The careful posture of someone who'd learned to make himself small, to avoid notice, to survive in spaces where he didn't belong. Like her, he was an outsider here. Like her, he carried scars that didn't show. "Neither do you," she replied. Outside, the evening call to prayer drifted across the desert from a distant village, its haunting melody mixing with the mechanical sounds of military life. In 12 hours, the sirens would wail and everything would change. The interrogation room smelled of stale coffee and fear. Elara sat across from Major Vance and Captain Torres from the Criminal Investigation Division, her hands folded on the metal table. Torres slid a photograph across the table, her cleaning station from the night before, and there, barely visible, a single brass casing glinting like an accusation. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I cleaned up after myself. I always do. Always." Vance leaned forward, his eyes cold. "Like you always follow proper engagement protocols?" Within the hour, both she and Kai had been grilled separately. The message was clear. They were suspects, outsiders, problems to be solved. Hours later, they found themselves outside the mess tent as the sun painted the concrete barriers in amber light. Kai stared at his untouched food. "They think we're working together. Some kind of conspiracy," Elara said, settling beside him. "Maybe they're right," Kai said quietly. "About what?" "About us not belonging here." He looked at her directly. "I've been thinking about requesting a transfer. Maybe even getting out altogether." "You can't let them win," she said. "Win what?" "This isn't a game, Elara. These people will never accept us. You're the woman who killed a fellow soldier, and I'm the outsider who doesn't look like them, doesn't sound like them." His voice carried a weariness that seemed far too old for his 19 years. Before she could respond, Sergeant Price appeared with 2 MPs. "Cross, Nguyen, you need to come with us." The armory had been transformed into a crime scene. Captain Torres met them at the door. "We found something," he said without preamble. He led them to a table where evidence bags were laid out in neat rows. "Ballistics analysis of the round fired last night. The trajectory calculations." Elara's blood ran cold. In one of the clear plastic bags was a notebook. Her notebook. But the pages visible through the plastic weren't supply lists. They were trajectory calculations, wind speed notations, range estimations. The kind of calculations a sniper would make. "This is your handwriting?" Torres asked. "Yes, but..." Elara stared at the notebook, her mind racing. "Those are training exercises from before my reassignment. I kept them for reference." "For what, Cross?" Vance had appeared beside Torres, his face a mask of cold satisfaction. "For planning your next shot?" The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Elara felt as if the world had narrowed to this moment. This table, these evidence bags that seemed to spell out her guilt. "You think I shot at someone last night?" Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I think you've been planning something for months," Vance replied. "I think the Martinez incident wasn't an accident. I think you've been carrying a grudge, and last night you decided to act on it." Kai stepped forward, his young face flushed with anger. "That's insane. Staff Sergeant Cross would never..." "Wouldn't she?" Vance turned his cold gaze to the younger soldier. "Tell me, Nguyen, what do you really know about your friend here? What do you know about what she's capable of when the pressure gets too high?" Elara looked at Kai and saw something she'd hoped never to see. Doubt. Just a flicker, just a moment's hesitation, but enough to confirm what she'd always known. In the end, she was alone. The demonstration was scheduled for 0800 hours the next morning, a forced proving ground that felt more like an execution than an evaluation. Major Vance had assembled half the base personnel around the makeshift firing range, their faces a mixture of curiosity and barely concealed hostility. "Cross, Nguyen." Vance's voice carried across the assembled crowd. "You've both maintained your innocence regarding last night's incident. Today, you'll have the opportunity to demonstrate your competence under controlled conditions." Elara stood at the firing line, her M9 heavy in her hands. Beside her, Kai held his M4 carbine with the careful grip of someone who'd learned to respect weapons, but had never truly needed to use them in anger. "The rules are simple," Captain Torres announced. "You'll engage targets as they appear. Some will be marked as friendly, others as hostile. You have 3 seconds to identify and engage or hold fire." 3 seconds. The same amount of time Elara had had that night in Sector 5 when Corporal Martinez had emerged from behind a concrete barrier. The first target popped up, a clear hostile, weapon raised, threatening posture. Elara's muscle memory took over, and she put 2 rounds center mass before she'd consciously made the decision to fire. Beside her, Kai engaged his own target with steady precision. More targets appeared in rapid succession. A civilian with hands raised, hold fire. An insurgent with an RPG, engage immediately. Each decision came faster than thought, driven by training and instinct. Then the alarm sounded. Not the controlled beeping of the demonstration, but the base's actual perimeter alarm. A wailing siren that meant real contact, real danger, real bullets flying somewhere beyond the concrete barriers. "Contact! Contact south perimeter!" The radio crackled with urgent voices. "We have multiple insurgents. Approximately squad-sized element, engaging the patrol gate. The demonstration forgotten, soldiers scattered toward their positions. But Elara found herself frozen, the familiar paralysis of that night 6 months ago creeping up her spine like ice water. The sound of gunfire, real gunfire, echoed across the base, and suddenly she was back in Sector 5, watching Martinez fall. "Elara!" Kai's voice cut through her paralysis. "The South Tower, they're calling for support." She looked toward the guard tower that overlooked the main approach to the base. Smoke was rising from its base, and she could see muzzle flashes in the distance where insurgents had taken cover behind a burned-out vehicle. The tower's crew was pinned down, unable to provide covering fire for a patrol that was trapped in the kill zone below. "We have to help them," Kai said, but his voice carried the uncertainty of someone who'd trained for this moment, but never lived it. "I can't." The words came out as a whisper. "I can't do this again." "Yes, you can." He grabbed her arm, his young face intense with conviction. "Those are our people out there." Through the chaos, she could hear Major Vance barking orders, organizing the response. But the geometry of the situation was clear to anyone who understood tactics. The patrol was caught in the open. The tower crew was suppressed, and without immediate support, soldiers were going to die. Elara closed her eyes and felt the weight of her weapon, the familiar grip that had once been as natural as breathing. When she opened them again, Kai was watching her with something she hadn't seen in months. Trust. "The tower has the high ground," she said, her tactical mind overriding her fear. "But they need someone to call adjustments, to coordinate fire with the patrol's movement." "You mean, I mean we go up there, and I talk them through it." Her voice grew stronger with each word. "You watch my back, keep the approaches clear. I'll guide their fire to get our people out." They moved through the base like ghosts, using cover and concealment to avoid the scattered insurgent fire. The tower's ladder stretched 30 feet up the side of a concrete structure, exposed to enemy observation, but the only way to reach the crew above. "Ready?" Elara asked, her hand on the first rung. Kai nodded, his rifle trained on the likely approaches. "We do this together, Elara. Breathe, now." "Copy that. Ready on your mark." She climbed fast, muscle memory from countless training exercises guiding her movements. Above, the sound of gunfire grew louder, more desperate. The tower's crew, 2 soldiers she barely knew, looked at her with surprise and something that might have been relief. Sergeant Williams was bleeding from a head wound, while Specialist Chen was trying to operate the radio with hands that shook from adrenaline. "Cross? What the hell are you doing here?" "Helping you get our people home." She moved to the tower's firing port and assessed the situation below. The patrol, 6 soldiers, was pinned behind their disabled Humvee, taking fire from at least 3 positions. "Chen, get me the patrol leader on the radio." Her voice carried the authority of someone who'd done this before. "Williams, I need you to shift your fire to the building at 2 o'clock, 2nd floor window." "Cross, I don't think..." "Sergeant, those soldiers down there don't have time for doubt." She looked at him directly, and he saw something in her eyes that hadn't been there since the Martinez incident. Certainty. "Trust me." The radio crackled to life. "Tower, this is Bravo 6. We are taking heavy fire and cannot move. Request immediate support." Elara took the handset, her voice calm despite the bullets that were now impacting the tower's concrete walls. "Bravo 6, this is Tower Control. I have eyes on your position. On my mark, you're going to move to the drainage ditch at your 10 o'clock. Tower will provide covering fire." "Tower Control, who is this?" "Someone who's going to get you home," She keyed the radio again. Bravo 6, mark smoke on the building to your northeast. That's target priority 1. For 20 minutes, she orchestrated the battle like a conductor leading a deadly symphony. Her voice never wavered, never showed the fear that was eating at her insides. When the patrol finally reached safety behind the base's outer barriers, when the insurgents melted away into the desert, she finally allowed herself to breathe. Tower Control, this is Bravo 6. The patrol leader's voice carried exhaustion and gratitude in equal measure. Outstanding work up there. You saved our asses. We did it, Kai said, his voice filled with wonder and exhaustion. We did it, she agreed, but her tone was quieter, more reflective. Because she knew that while they'd won this battle, the war, the real war, the one fought in conference rooms and personnel files and the hearts of soldiers who would never fully trust her again, was far from over. Within hours, Camp Resolute had transformed into a media circus. At the center of it all sat Elara Cross, uncomfortable in a clean uniform, facing a bank of cameras and microphones. Staff Sergeant Cross. The reporter's voice was honey-smooth and razor-sharp. Yesterday you were under investigation for a weapons incident. Today you're being hailed as a hero. How do you reconcile those two realities? I did my job, she said simply. That's what soldiers do. But there are those who question whether women belong in combat roles at all. How do you respond to critics who argue that the military is no place for social experiments? I respond by pointing to the 6 soldiers who went home to their families last night, she said, her voice gaining strength. I respond by noting that courage doesn't have a gender, and competence isn't determined by chromosomes. Later that evening, she found Kai sitting alone behind the communications bunker, staring out at the desert where the sun was painting the horizon in shades of copper and gold. Rough day? She asked, settling beside him. Sergeant Collins pulled me aside after the interview, told me I should be careful about my associations, said being seen as your ally might hurt my career prospects. Maybe he's right. Maybe you should... Don't. Kai's voice was firm. Don't you dare suggest I abandon you because it might be inconvenient. We're soldiers, Elara. We don't leave people behind. But the real conversation Elara needed wouldn't come from cameras or career warnings. It would come from someone who understood the weight of command under fire. The next morning, Kai introduced her to Captain Isabella Ramirez, a veteran with a jagged scar running from her left temple to her jaw and burn marks on her right hand. But her eyes were warm, intelligent, and completely free of judgment. I commanded a military police company in Fallujah during the worst of the fighting, Ramirez explained. Lost 3 soldiers in my first month, including my best friend since basic training. Spent the next 2 years convinced I was a failure. What changed? Elara asked. Time, experience, and the realization that second-guessing every decision is a luxury soldiers can't afford. Ramirez's voice carried the weight of hard-won wisdom. You made a mistake, Cross. One mistake in a situation where there were no good choices. But yesterday, when it mattered most, you stepped up. That's what defines a soldier. Not the mistakes we make, but how we respond when our people need us most. That afternoon, Major Vance called her to his office. She expected another interrogation. Instead, she found him standing behind his desk with an expression she couldn't quite read. What you did yesterday was exceptional, he said. The patrol leader's after-action report makes it clear that without your intervention, we would have lost soldiers. I did what any soldier would do, sir. No. Vance moved to the window. Any soldier would have followed orders, taken cover, waited for the all-clear. You took initiative. You took command of a situation that was rapidly deteriorating and turned it around. He turned back to face her, and for the first time since she'd arrived at Camp Resolute, his expression held something approaching respect. I'm recommending you for the Bronze Star with V device for valor. I'm also recommending that you be returned to full combat status, effective immediately. The words hit her like a physical blow. Combat status. The thing she'd lost, the identity that had been stripped away after the Martinez incident, suddenly offered back. No, sir, she said finally. I belong here. You're good. Vance's smile was thin but genuine. Because we've got a war to fight, and I was wrong about you, Cross. Dead wrong. But yesterday you proved what I should have seen from the beginning. You're exactly the kind of soldier this army needs. 3 weeks later, the ceremony took place in the base's main courtyard, as the sun painted the morning sky in shades of rose and gold. General Patricia Hayes, who had flown in from Baghdad specifically for the ceremony, held the Bronze Star Medal in her weathered hands. Staff Sergeant Cross, the general's voice carried across the courtyard. For conspicuous gallantry and intrepidity in action against an armed enemy while serving as tower control coordinator during an enemy attack on forward operating base Resolute. As Hayes pinned the medal to Elara's uniform, their eyes met briefly, and in that moment, Elara saw recognition, one warrior acknowledging another. But it was what happened next that would stay with her forever. Private First Class Nguyen, Elara said, her voice carrying across the assembled formation. Front and center. Kai stepped forward, confusion evident on his young face. In her hands, Elara held a campaign medal. Nothing as prestigious as the Bronze Star, but significant nonetheless. For exceptional performance under fire, she announced, and for demonstrating that courage comes in many forms. She pinned the medal to his uniform, then stepped back and saluted. Well done, soldier. Later that afternoon, she sat writing in her journal when a shadow fell across her page. She looked up to see a young woman in fresh ACUs, her name tape reading Martinez. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same dark eyes, the same determined jawline that Elara remembered from that terrible night 6 months ago. Staff Sergeant Cross? The woman's voice was steady, but Elara could hear the emotion underneath. I'm Private Second Class Sofia Martinez. I just arrived yesterday. Elara's breath caught in her throat. Martinez. My brother was Corporal Diego Martinez. He died in Sector 5. The words hung in the air between them like a bridge across an impossible chasm. I know what happened, Sofia continued. I know it was an accident. I know you've been carrying that weight. She paused, seeming to gather her courage. Diego wouldn't want that. He joined the army to serve, to protect people. He understood the risks. I'm sorry, Elara said, the words feeling inadequate but necessary. I'm so sorry for your loss. I know you are. Sofia's voice was gentle but firm. But I didn't come here for apologies. I came here because I want to serve like he did. And I heard that you're the person who can teach me how to be the kind of soldier he would have been proud of. The request hit Elara like a physical blow. To train Diego's sister, to be responsible for another Martinez in harm's way, it seemed like the cruelest kind of irony. But as she looked into Sofia's eyes, she saw something that gave her pause. Not just determination, but trust. It won't be easy, Elara said finally. I didn't expect it to be. And I can't promise. I'm not asking for promises, Sofia interrupted. I'm asking for honesty, for training, for the chance to prove that Diego's sacrifice meant something. Elara nodded slowly, feeling the weight of new responsibility settling on her shoulders. But this time, it felt different. Not like a burden, but like a purpose. As the sun set over Camp Resolute, painting the concrete barriers and razor wire in shades of amber and gold, Elara Cross stood with Sofia Martinez and Kai Nguyen, 3 soldiers from different backgrounds united by their commitment to something larger than themselves. "No one's invisible here," Elara said quietly, her words carrying across the desert air. "Not anymore." In her journal that night, Elara wrote her final entry. "Justice doesn't arrive on schedule. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare or guarantee a happy ending. Sometimes it comes disguised as loss, as failure, as the kind of second chance you never thought you deserved. But when it does arrive, late, unexpected, wearing the face of a young soldier who trusts you with her brother's legacy, you have a choice. You can turn away, claim you're not worthy, insist that someone else should carry the burden. Or you can step forward, accept the weight, and prove that redemption is possible for anyone willing to serve something greater than their own fear." She closed the journal and looked out through her small window at the desert beyond the base's perimeter. The scent of gun oil still lingered on her hands, no longer a reminder of failure, but a promise of purpose renewed. The scent of gun oil still lingered on her hands, no longer a reminder of failure, but a promise of purpose. Their courage changed everything, not through grand gestures, but through quiet persistence when the world demanded they disappear. What story of hidden strength are you carrying? Share it below, because every voice matters when justice arrives late but arrives nonetheless. Like and subscribe for more stories of courage that refused to stay silent. Justice had arrived late to Camp Resolute, but it had arrived nonetheless. And in its wake, 3 soldiers stood ready to face whatever challenges tomorrow might bring. United not by their similarities, but by their shared commitment to ensuring that no one, regardless of gender, heritage, or past mistakes, would ever be invisible again.